It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast here today. We're going to get right to the show. In this episode of Retire Repurposed, we're going to dive deeper into the lessons learned since Ben Tages first published his book, Repurposed, back in 2017. We're going to continue to explore this critical issue of identity in retirement. Drawing insights from C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, Ben is going to discuss 3 common responses people have when searching for fulfillment in this new chapter of life. In this episode, we unpack the complexities of reinventing oneself in retirement and discover strategies for a purposeful post-career life. Enjoy this episode. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. So glad you're joining us on yet another episode of Retire Repurposed. We are continuing our mini-series that we have spent now about 5 or 6 weeks on, and we're dissecting some lessons learned since first publishing the book, Repurposed, The Untold Story of Retirement in America back in 2017. This message continues to morph and evolve over the years. And Ben Tages has had hundreds of more meetings with retirees, and we've had hundreds of podcasts. And because of that, you just expand on some of these ideas. And so it's been fun to kind of look back and say, you know what, if we were to rewrite that book again, what are some key themes that we would spend some more time on and really try to hit home? If you missed any of this last 5 or 6 episodes, I encourage you to go back and listen to some of these shows. Some really insightful things here. And in fact, last week, we really talked about your identity. And we're going to talk more about this on this week's podcast. But on last week's show, this whole idea of identity, what you are retiring from, what happens? What should your life stand for? What should it be all about? And so many times people leave their identity at the doorstep of their job when they retire, and they don't spend a lot of time really diving into who they should be becoming. And again, that has a lot to do with how society is framing retirement. And there's just a mismatch. There's a disconnect that retirees often have. Ben Tages joins me on the show now. Before we jump into today's show, Ben, let's just go back and kind of set the stage as to what we've talked about the last several weeks, including last week on identity. Some big topics that people need to hear.
Yeah, and one that we're talking about with clients a lot, Jared, is when they ask you, what do you do? Don't say nothing. Don't say I'm retired. Really think about how you're going to answer that question, because it does get down to how we talk about ourselves becomes kind of how we feel about ourselves many times. And I think people that are in that retirement mode, you're not going, if you're retired from a job and you're no longer doing that, you start to question identity. Figure out how you're going to answer the question of, so what do you do? Don't just say, well, I'm retired. Say, what do you do? Well, right now, I'm busy with fill in the blank. Yeah. Right now, I'm really focusing in my personal life about becoming a better fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm learning about this. So what do you do? Well, actually, I'm really busy with this, and that. Too many times in our world, we pigeonhole people, especially when we're working, into, hey, I'm a financial advisor. I'm a wealth advisor. That's my day job, I guess, here. If I were to ask you, what do you do? You probably wouldn't just say, well, I'm a public speaker. I'm a motor. I think you have to get back to who you were created to be. Yeah. And yes, part of that is our job. But I think too many retirees answer that question of, well, what do you do? Well, I'm retired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the title of last week's show was really trying to avoid the role-less role. I think that's a really interesting topic, a phrase I don't hear a lot of. In fact, I've never heard it outside of this conversation, your book. But that role-less role, touch on that just a little bit. What does that mean to a retiree, and why is that so dangerous?
Well, it's a scary time because if you're stuck between things, right? That's what we talked about last time, this liminality, this feeling of I'm stuck. And when you're without a role or purpose, life gets pretty bleak. Mm-hmm. Everything bothers you more, right? So if you're able to focus on, while we're working a career, I always know, hey, this is my job. This is my role in society. This is where I'm making a contribution to the people around me. Well, all of a sudden I'm in retirement and I start to feel a little lost. I'm stuck in this place of, I'm just, especially right away, Jared, that's when you feel that the worst, I think. When we talk to people, it's like, I'm stuck. And there's some okay season to feel that way, right? When you're in the middle. And I actually encourage clients to be in that for a time, I guess it's more of a Sabbath season, a true rest before just jumping into something. We're not suggesting that you go right from your normal, your career, and you go right into the next thing and you're full tilt going. Take some time to rest, but don't just be stuck without a role. Everybody needs a purpose. Everybody needs a reason to get out of bed in the morning, a reason to, a way that they can contribute. Yeah. That is, I think, one of the biggest takeaways from the conversations I've had since writing the book is sometimes, many times, retirees feel like they're just stuck without a role in life.
Yeah, and that goes back to anybody. That's not just retirement. I think even as you were explaining that, it seems like retirement isn't the problem. The problem is that you can't go through life without a purpose. That problem gets hyper exposed in a really big way the moment somebody retires and all of a sudden their job is taken away, and now they're left kind of grasping at straws, just trying to kind of fulfill a void that really is in the heart of everybody.
Yeah, you just got more time, right, on your hands. And sometimes when we're a person who is, tilted one way or the other, more time does not always make it better. In fact, many times the additional time compounds problems. And that is something that we've seen too. So I think just being aware, we've talked about this in many shows about the change that's there. It's a big life change. It's not a small one. Looking at your life, looking at your past experiences, all things that we do. We work with clients in Repurposed University, which is something that we created, kind of co-created several years back. Again, since writing the book, but it was more tactical how to walk through. We have a workbook, and really it's a class that I think any new retiree should think about going through. If somebody wants that information, shoot us an email. We'd love to get that in your hands. Even take a group of retirees through it, because again, it's so important. Realize it's a life change, and then really focus in on your next purpose, your next role in life. Yeah,
that role is so important. Last week's show was called Avoiding the Role-less Role in Retirement. Again, a huge concept. It's a must listen. So if you missed last week's show, go back, find us on your favorite podcasting platform, and go check that out. That leads us directly into this week's show. We're going to continue this conversation on identity. And again, this is kind of a part 2 of last week's show, Ben. You mentioned a lot of quotes, many of them coming from one of your favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, and we're going to go a little bit deeper on this week's show. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think I went too fast. I go back and sometimes I'll listen to shows and I'll think about, did we hammer home enough this idea or that idea? And I think the thing that I see a lot of people, and this is not just meant for retirees, but I hear a lot of people who are getting stuck, who are feeling like I'm searching or looking for the answer. I feel like it's because we are not fulfilling our identity. We're not being true to who we were created to be. We're not walking in relationship with our Creator. So in Mere Christianity, again, C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors, he talks about that. He talks about this feeling that many of us feel of longing and searching. And I think I've been in that place, Jared, over times. And I think it's always, I feel that way more when I've stepped further and further away from God. Yeah. And when I see myself living a life that is more focused on me than others, certainly. But C.S. Lewis talks about if we have that feeling, and many times it's the world letting us down. Jared, we've expected this next thing to fulfill us. I mean, I go back to the book, and that's probably where I would deepen this conversation. I mean, if you've read my book, I talked about this dirt bike story, and I wanted so badly as a young man to improve my life by getting this brand new dirt bike. I had this old 1974 hand-me-down of a dirt bike. It was all dinged up and scratched up and rusted up, but it worked, and it was mine. I didn't owe anybody anything for it. It was my dirt bike, and I could spend most of my summers riding it and enjoying it. And at some point, started to feel like, no, I'm searching for something different. And for me in that moment, it was I needed this new dirt bike. Some friends had gotten them, and I thought, I'm not fulfilled unless I have it. And I ended up buying this new dirt bike, going into debt from my dad, and spent more money than I had. And now I was stuck for the next 2 summers working a second job so I could pay for this dirt bike. And what happened at the end of the 2 summers is I realized I spent more time working to pay off this dirt bike, more time cleaning it than I did riding it. And it really messed up 2 years of my life. And I think that story, I think we've all done that. I think there's always been things that people expect to fulfill them in life that let us down. I think retirement can be that. So C.S. Lewis, when he's talking about this idea of searching and longing, he said when the world lets us down, and sometimes that's something like a dirt bike, sometimes it's your marriage, success, there's usually three different responses to that. The first one, and I think that's what people need to hear today, is don't just keep trying to achieve more. Don't think that it's something physical in this world that will make you happy. Don't think that it's a bigger trip, it's more success, it's this next new thing. Because we know that's not where the fulfillment's going to come from. The second thing he talks about is, the second response to being like this feeling of longing and searching is some people just say, well, I'm just going to be, he calls it the disillusioned man. Just going to give up. Just accept my lot that I am always going to be unhappy and always going to be let down by life. And that's not good either, right? And then the third thing, we talked about that last week, was you need to understand that you were not created for this world. And he talks about like a baby duck searching for water. Like that is what the duck was made to be. And until they're there, they're going to feel off. You're going to feel searching. So I think tying it all back to that dirt bike story and how I was trying to fulfill something, a void there, I didn't think about it that deeply. But had I just realized, Jared, that I was being number one of the scenario I just explained, like I'm just going to find something more, something bigger, something faster, it's going to make me happy.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast yesterday, and I can't help but to think about this. And I want to bring it up here at some point in the conversation, maybe not yet, but let me ask you a question. Some people can buy a dirt bike when they're a kid or as an adult, and it's incredibly fulfilling and satisfying and adds to the quality of their lives, right? In your opinion, how come that one was such a miss for you? And how come other things like going on trips, traveling, golfing, some of these quintessential retirement activities can provide so much enjoyment, fulfillment, can add to the quality of their life and almost help them become more of who they are. And sometimes they don't. In your opinion, what's the differentiator?
It was the pedestal of where I put it. We talked about in the first book, the showroom effect. It's like when you get to that point where the anticipation, the expectation of something, whether it be a person through marriage or it be an item, a thing of this world, a new car or whatever it is, when it moves up on a pedestal above anything. I mean, it was the thing I had to have. I worked so hard for. So that combined with the fact that I went in debt for it. Right. So now you're dealing with this. Oh man, now yes, you magnify the mistake, and I think that's it. So I think for some of us, we expect too much of retirement. People expect that it's going to not only make my life better, but it's going to fulfill my life. If I could get rid of work, I'm going to be happy. And therein lies, I think, the biggest thing. So it's when you put anything on a pedestal,
Sure.
and when you expect this great. I would think the same thing in marriage. If you're coming into that season, I remember that too. It's like, well, this is it. We've arrived. I
Right.
put everything into my spouse, and then
She's completed.
she's going to complete me. Yeah, that statement, right? I know for one, my wife right away found out. Oh man, this is probably we had some learning to do. He's not. I mean, I was raised with 4 boys. Let me tell you that I have 4 brothers, and my wife had, or 3 brothers. She was one of 4 sisters, and we had a lot of learning to do.
Yeah.
We did not right away complete each other. That's not how it works. Now, we had wonderful premarital counseling, and our pastor did a great job to kind of set our expectations properly,
Right.
much like I hope we do for our clients who are retiring. Give them that, reframe it,
Sure.
set the expectation that no, it's not going to complete you. It is all it's going to do is give you more time back,
Sure.
really valuable time.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to downplay how great it can be, but again, it can't be on a pedestal and cannot be this expectation of it's going to complete you or change you a great deal as a person, because it won't.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think that there was a right or wrong answer to that question. I was interested to hear your perspective on that, because I think intention matters. You know what I mean? Like I think why we do certain things, purchase certain things, chase certain things, whatever you want to call it. If the intention is off, it will not really resonate with our soul. Going back to this podcast I was listening to yesterday, it was really, really interesting that the guy talking, he was talking about how we almost have like 2 selves existing at the same time, right? You've got your pure self, the spiritual self, the self that God created you to be, the part of you that was designed in your mother's womb, especially from the divine. It's pure, it's holy. The Bible would call that like our spiritual self, our spiritual mind, right? Those are the things that have pure intentions. They want to be joyful givers. They want to add to society. They search for righteousness. They want to love fully, right? And then there's he explained it as you have kind of this illusionary self, false self, that what we would call in the Bible like the flesh, so to speak. It's the ego, the pride. It's the reason why we may want to chase more. And he's like, as you grow and evolve, what we would call in biblical terms sanctification and grow, it's like this one starts to die off. The illusionary man starts to die off, and more of the pure man, of the pure at heart, the gold, so to speak, starts to shine through. I thought that was a really unique illustration. I never heard it put in those terms before. I understood what he was trying to say, but I never heard it explained that way. But he said the exact same thing. He said, if you are chasing something and it's done from the illusionary self, the false self, again, what we would call the flesh, you may get it. Like you may actually get the thing, but it will be a very, very short-sighted fulfillment because it's not resonating with the true self. You know what I'm saying? And so one of your 3 responses to feeling off, that's sketched out here with C.S. Lewis. He's talking about how there's always going to want to be more. I think that in many instances, we should be searching for more, but the intent. It goes back to intent. If your heart is off, it will never provide.
So true, Jared. And I've had that conversation many times. I deal with people who are many times of very, very high net worth and wealth, and the discussion around second homes and third homes or things comes up a lot, in stewardship. And I think I do. I go back to that same type of why are you getting it discussion so many times. I mean, I have a second home, Jared, and I think I talked to a good friend of mine about that before purchasing that home, and I remember talking about it with him, and we know each other, and really our connection was from all of our trips out to Haiti together. To visit with people that many times don't even have one home. Mm-hmm. And remember that discussion, I was like, how do you feel about that? Here I am. And it got kind of legalistic, and it's like, well, man, can I have 2 homes? I was looking at all that, and he just stopped. He says, well, why? Why are you getting that cabin up in the North Woods of Minnesota? And I said, I want a place where my daughters and my wife and I and our families can go and enjoy time together, to get away. And he was like, well, then why wouldn't you? It sounds like a pretty good intention. I'm like, well, yeah. And it made my decision. We ended up buying it, and it has been a wonderful place of time where we get to go and do those things. So, and I did go in debt at the time to do that. I've never felt any remorse for that, but it wasn't ever set out to fulfill me, to create. I mean, it was just a thing that was going to enhance our lives, enhance our relationships, versus a thing that I had to have, that I was like, oh, I'm not gonna, somebody else has got one, I got to get one, or man, this is a thing that's gonna, make, my life complete. And it never was. And therefore I think the intention was right.
I think it's important that we kind of dissect this, and I like this conversation because you and I would both agree retirement, in fact, life in general, there should be more. I think, again, I come from the camp of like, I want more out of life, striving for more to fulfill our illusionary self, as this gentleman yesterday on this podcast put it, wrong, right? Or it's not wrong. It's just, it's going to be a miss. It's never going to fulfill. Striving for more, having more, asking for more of God, trying to become more, phenomenal, with the right intent. So I think it was important that we spent this time on this and really tried to dissect that point.
Yeah, I think sometimes our shows, might come across, retirement's bad, or not working and create value. I mean, the idea around abundance, Jared. I love the thought of like, we can have more, and God wants us to enjoy what we have, enjoy our lives certainly, but it's when those things, again, back to the world side of this, when it's the goal, it's the end, not the means to turn it financial. And I think that's where a lot of our discussions end up going too, is this having more money will not make you happier. We know that there's a certain level, right, that we understand that to have basic needs met. But after that point, like Bill Gates says, it's the same hamburger, right? I mean, we're living the same life. What's important and lasting are our time with our the people that are important to us, enjoying the really what we've worked so hard for. So I think there's a lot of really great things that happen in retirement. What I don't ever want to see again is that it becomes put on a pedestal. It becomes like the society would have it as like, that's your goal, right? And it wasn't created for that. Going back to why they started with retirement, and I outlined some of that in the book Repurposed, where we said, no, you are kind of confused with what retirement is supposed to be, right? It was originally intended not to be just life and leisure and sitting on the beach somewhere. That's what society has made it become, because again, we want to sell that idea. It's a lot easier to sell, hey, work really hard, save all your money so that someday you can start enjoying life. And that's something we're talking about next week's show, is kind of this wealth versus health conundrum, and how as we tend to have more money, our health tends to decline. And how do we balance that out, right, as a new retiree?
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes left here. The one side of the pendulum is strive for more. The other side is I'm going to give up, put it in cruise control, never grow again, just kind of exist. That's not really the right way either. Again, we've got about 90 seconds left. Let's just talk about that briefly, and again, give people a really good nugget as we close out this show as to what it should look like and what it should be all about.
Well, it should all be about balance. And most importantly, Jared, you have to keep an other-centered life. I think every time that, again, I look at identity, I look at how I'm living my best life, I'm living closer and closer to my Creator. I start to look more like what would, remember the WWJD thing, what would Jesus do? And you look at His hands. I talked about it last week's show. You look at His, if His hands are started reflected in yours, and you start to think, man, you're not perfect. Nobody is. But I'm doing more of my time is starting to look like what would Jesus do in that place. And again, most people, if they've got a problem with Christians, it's not a problem with Jesus. It's a problem with us saying we're going to look different. We're going to reflect Him. We're going to be this way, and then we're not. So more than anything, I think that's where I start with. If you're feeling this feeling of like, disconnect. You're feeling lost. You're feeling without a role in life. Remember your chief role, right? And that's why you were created. And I think if you get back to that, you'll be well on your way to living a great retirement.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.